of that church in Philly, but also there's some more to it that I really want to get to. Just real quick, I want to give you a quick profile of mega churches in America. Again, basically what we know, and then towards the tail end of the conversation, we'll talk about what we don't know and what will necessitate this research project that Dave, Dale, and I will be embarking upon here soon. I want to talk about some of the focal points of megachurch ministry, what makes them who they are, what they are, and why they grow the way that they do. Again, give you some more pieces to the tab, and then we'll talk a little bit about the research project as we keep moving forward and conclude. Big deal is, there are approximately 1,800 mega churches in the United States. Typically, a mega church is one that has on average about 2,000 members coming through its doors annually. But typically, you can classify a mega church as one that has about 1,700 members regularly attending, and that can go upward. But the bottom line is, it's really about what they do, not only inside the walls, but outside those same walls. Now, the unfortunate part about it is that here in America, again, we don't always get the positive on mega churches. Again, unfortunately, in the last decade or so, mega churches have been hit with a lot of scandals and negative media, but on the whole, the vast majority of them are doing a great job. Bottom line is, when we look at the ecclesial life here in America, most mid-sized to small churches follow what the mega churches are doing. So they have a tremendous influence on church life in America. Again, as we define what a mega church really is, on average, again, this data comes from William Byrd and Scott Thuma over at the Harvard Institute. But again, based on their research, about 2,000 people are coming through the doors weekly, men, women, children. Typically, the leader is charismatic, and in some cases, very authoritarian. They're active 7 days a week. So literally, the doors don't stay shut. I mean, they're pretty much open for activity. Have a diverse range of ministries. As we look at the ministry profile of Enon, you'll see they've got a ton of ministries going, but they've got them organized in a very unique kind of way. Small groups work exceptionally well in churches of this size. Again, here in Knoxville, there is a mega church. It has probably 60 small groups, everything from leisure clubs on down to outings involving hunting, fishing, so on and so forth. Typically, most mega churches are marked by an innovative, creative orchestra, not necessarily orchestra style, but worship style. A lot of our larger churches, particularly new constructions, are building orchestra pits to help magnify the music somewhat, to get people into the mood to worship, but also to attract new members. The structures are often different. Different in the sense they are very large, sometimes very complex. But again, I think if we look at 1,700 plus mega churches across the country, you'll find these commonalities. Talking about the largest mega churches in the country, right at the top is Lakewood in Houston. 43,500 members. This is 2020 data. North Point, Alpharetta, Georgia, about 30,000. And then we move down a little bit. Again, Gateway in Texas, 28,000. Again, Fellowship, Texas again, 24,000. Then we move into our part of the region, the country rather, the southeastern region. We see Elevation over in North Carolina, followed by Church of the Highlands in Alabama. And then, of course, we jump back out to California and Saddleback, which has about 22,000 members on that particular campus in Lake Forest, Illinois. As they rank these, the 20th one was Southeast Christian which is in Louisville. But again, most of these are well over 20,000 congregants. Now, the other peculiarity is that most of these mega churches are in the Bible Belt, okay, here in the country. Again, you can see those states that constitute the Bible Belt: Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas. And I was surprised to see Utah being named as a part of the Bible Belt. That's way up there. But in any event, we're seeing a lot of growth when it comes to mega churches in these particular states that comprise the Bible Belt. What's interesting about mega churches is also they have very solid congregational identities. I think of the large mega church in Lithonia, Georgia. And that one was formerly headed up by the late Bishop Eddie Long. And they had close to 20,000 members. And again, if you ask a person where they go, they would never tell you the city. They would just simply tell you New Birth because of Bishop Long's preaching style, his outreach into the community, and maybe I should say not his, but the church's outreach in the community. They were one of the first churches in the country to build a recplex right on their campus, but also an independent fitness center, Samson's Fitness Center. What it all comes down to when we talk about identity, again, there are a few things that comprise that identity: what they believe, what they value, and how they relate to each other internally and externally, the symbols of that church. Again, sometimes it's colors, sometimes it's the corporate logo, sometimes it is the structure itself. This idea of narratives and stories. Where I'm engaging in pastorate right now, that church is 103 years old. And so there's this long legacy of families, of history surrounding where it lies in East Knoxville. And those stories kind of carry over decade to decade to decade, and they're passed down through families. Okay. The sense of spirituality, again, shaped by tradition, shaped by doctrine, but also shaped by religious practice itself. Also, this idea of a stance, particularly in this era in which, again, we're really embarking on social justice in a big way. You'll notice in the clip on Enon, one of the things that James Brown highlighted was the fact that my uncle was one of King's colleagues. And he actually came to Cleveland, Ohio, and did a revival there, right in the heart of the civil rights movement. And you see my cousin sitting on the lap of Martin Luther King. Now notice how he's taken that portrait. It hangs in his office there at Enon, and he builds on that legacy. Okay. Again, as we talk about their profile here momentarily, we'll get to that a little more. And then the style in terms of how they actually deliver ministry there. Again, differs from church to church, so it always does. But with mega churches, there are some really progressive types of styles, not only of worship, but of the way they deliver programs and services to not only their congregants, but also their communities. But also, again, as a part of that corporate identity, you'll find that the theologies are really interesting. Most, particularly the Christian, are well-grounded in Christian theology. That congregational theology suggests that here's who we are, here's why we believe what we believe, which drives us to essentially do exactly what we do. This idea of missiology, that theology of mission, both overseas, but also here locally. And you notice it in the clip on Enon again. Right on the screen, it says, it's about saving souls. Okay, so they're very upfront and very personal about that. But they also have a theology about health and wellness, again, as ordained by God. So therefore, they put a lot of time in terms of programming leisure opportunities, fitness, health, wellness, opportunities as well as sport. And then the final one is a part of the overarching theology, particularly in this era, is this idea of community development. We're not only thinking about the good health and well-being of our church and our congregation over time, but we are also concerned about the communities that surround it, economically, health-wise, relationally, but also in terms of how we coalesce to solve problems in our community. And you'll notice that most of these pastors are right out front on social issues. Okay, when we talk about leisure, fitness, health, wellness, here's some of the kinds of amenities that you'll find. Most of them are anchored with a large family life center. Normally those are fairly large, fairly expansive. The idea here is we want our congregants to do one-stop shopping when it comes to their health, wellness, leisure pursuits, and also sport. Many of them have the accoutrements that tie back into sport: gymnasia, athletic fields, soccer fields, baseball fields. Sevier Heights Baptist Church, which is actually 1.5 miles from my office building, has again about 15 acres of land, and they have constructed soccer complexes, baseball, softball fields, a walking and running track in one of the select areas, and a battery of tennis courts out there. Sevier Heights has probably 3,000 members. Okay, so again, you see this pattern. You know, in terms of administrative structures, one of the things that we're seeing is, you know, again, the church is not, these churches are not poor. They're not struggling financially. Therefore, they have dedicated budgets to provide for recreation, health, wellness, sport-related ministries. They're staffed relatively well. Typically, there's a lead, one full-time person, sometimes more, but also they have a healthy mechanism to recruit and retain volunteers. So programmatically, again, you know, again, sport, health, wellness, small group leisure pursuits. We're now starting to see healthcare and medical services, particularly during the COVID period. Many of the mega churches open their doors to become shots for vaccines, to become sites for vaccines, I should say. The literature also suggests that mega churches are now prime places to, as Lauren talked about in the other presentation, to really get human kinds of services, social services, food banks, clothing pantries, automobiles, believe it or not. People are gifting cars to these mega churches, and they in turn can turn them over to families that can afford to sustain them. Now the question is, you know, we really don't know what most of these mega churches are realistically doing. We get snapshots of some things that they offer on their website, in their annual reports. They will mention some things, but what we don't see is a full representation of facilities and programs, and that's part of what we're going to be doing with our own research project. Also, another interesting phenomenon that I pulled out of the 2020 MegaChurch study was, again, this renewed emphasis on people with disabilities. Historically, that has been a problem, a huge problem, in terms of access, in terms of opportunity, in terms of integrating persons with disabilities into mainstream worship. But one of the things that Bird and Thumoth show us in this last report is that more and more of these mega churches are now starting to do that, but they're also starting to offer programs for people with disabilities and their families. Again, as you can see on the graph on the left-hand side of the screen, again, you can see where, and again, here's where I believe some of these services are embedded in these areas called community service activities, but also educational or fellowship activities. I think they stick them in that cluster and don't necessarily name them out front. But again, I think we've got an opportunity to really unearth some of this. So when we look at what makes these mega churches go, I think there are four things, at least based on my readings and looking at the 2015, 2020 mega church reports. First, they have pastors with big visions. These are not just churches. These are business enterprises. You may have noted that in the short clip, talked about the fact that my cousin went to Harvard. Harvard University has a certificate, then a master's program in church development, has a profound business focus. And it talks about the business enterprise of megachurches. So just as we do analytics in sport, we're now doing analytics when it comes to megachurches. When we talk about marketing and growth, same things with churches. And Harvard has done a pretty good job at offering that in the last 10 years or so. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they're dedicating resources. Again, one thing that the last two megachurch reports have not told us is exactly how much money is partitioned off for the kinds of things that we're interested in. But again, that's one of those things I think we can pick away at as we move through the study. Again, as I mentioned earlier, theologies are shifting. It's not just about Christian theology anymore. It's now about the theology of community development. It's about being pro-leisure, pro-recreation, pro-sport. This idea of taking the gospels and, again, making them work so that people will get involved as a part of serving others. But I like what Lauren said in our last presentation about holistic well-being, not only of people, but also the entire congregation, okay, but also communities. And so again, the theology has shifted, and thus they're taking a more holistic approach to thinking about how we deliver services in those large congregations. This is one I really believe in, and that is it takes enlightened clergy to do this. Again, two fellows on the screen. Rick Warren. Rick Warren is retiring in August. He's already given his notice. He did that the first Sunday in June. Rick is now 67 years of age. Okay, so he is gearing himself up to retire. But look at what Saddleback has done under his leadership. Now, again, Rick is seminary trained, very congregation centered and community oriented. When you read Rick Warren's work, again, he embraces those theologies of work, play, Sabbath, leisure, and then sport. Bill Curtis, the fellow at the bottom, he is a senior pastor at Mount Arrett Baptist Church in Pittsburgh. Again, when I was in seminary school, I did some work with his congregation when I wasn't able to go back home to Ohio. But the bottom line is, again, all the hallmarks are present right there. Bill himself, national reputation, seminary trained, has a business degree. And again, if you look at their budget, very healthy, okay? So again, one of the catalytic factors is that these guys and women are really the drivers of that vision and mission and can make it happen so that their churches can grow. And then finally, I would also suggest, and I believe the data tells a story, particularly in the last two megachurch reports done by Hartford Institute, that, you know what, people come to churches for very specific reasons. One, to hear a good preached word for Christian education, but also there's that fellowship dimension. We also want to have some fun. We want to be able to frolic a little bit. We want this profound sense of community. But also, if you're a young family, you're looking for a place to sit down and stay. If you're aging, you want to just not move around a lot. You want to stay right there. Again, and they will usually follow whoever the senior pastor is until the time of death. Okay, again, just a few more facts about Tabernacle, and then we're going to be ready to come down the stretch here. Again, this is my cousin, Alan. This is his wife, Ellen Jo. Again, both well-educated. They have two children, two daughters. Again, the quote unquote model family, if you will. Both are excellent people and do good work on the part of Enon. Enon, like many of the mega churches in the country, about one half of that 1,750 plus have multiple sites. Enon follows suit. Enon East is in Germantown, which is in the southern sector of the city, and then Enon West is out in the northeast sector of the city there. Again, programmatically, they do pretty much the same thing. Again, at West, you have a much larger sanctuary. You can seat between 6,000 and 7,000 people. It is built for 5,000, but I've actually been there when they've had close to 7,000 people in that sanctuary. And also, both sites do multiple services, starting on Friday evening. So if you can't get to church on Sunday, you can go Friday, you can go Saturday, and you can do 2 services on Sunday. Again, as we check this, again, we engage in this project in checking out many mega churches. Again, the idea here is that we'll use this exploratory case study design. Bottom line is we're simply looking at the facts. We'll make some assumptions. We'll go in, and again, this is more exploratory than anything else. So again, I'm excited about what we might find, but also what they will tell us as researchers. Here's a vision. Notice the vision, a place where people can encounter God. All right, now note the language. Very much grounded in Christian theology, the encounter with God. And the atmosphere, including the design of the sanctuary, can lead you into that space. Notice the mission. Really, Enon is about families. Very Christocentric, Bible-based, focusing on education, evangelism, to be inspirational, to motivate people to do things in that congregation, both inside the congregation and out. Now, notice on the back end of the mission, where it talks about, combating the negative and even demonic forces in the community. Now, again, they take that very serious there. As we talk about social justice, police brutality, failing school systems. My cousin is actually on the school board in Philly. So leadership becomes an imperative when it comes down to carrying out the mission of mega churches. Again, they give a little bit of that history towards the idea of both spirituality, but also this idea of stance as a part of their identity. The theme for 2021 is riding the wave, which is kind of interesting in its own right. Okay, here's a profile. Again, Alan has been there 27 years. MDiv from Southern Baptist, D-Min, Marriage and Family Ministry from Palmer, has an honorary doctorate in theology from Lincoln. Wife, similarly educated, denomination, National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, the largest strand of Black Baptists in the country. Again, we've looked at the vision and mission, 15,000 members and growing. Okay, 2 locations, 75 ministries grouped into what he calls communities, again, or ministry clusters towards the end of effective management of ministry. There is an associate pastor that is assigned to each one of these 7 cluster ministries. Okay, again, towards the end of letting people know what's going on, keeping people informed, heavily invested in social media, namely Facebook, Twitter, and the IG, believe it or not. And again, there are designated people that do those things within that congregation. Again, you've seen what it looks like on the inside. This is the Mammoth Sanctuary, but also, again, I'm not sure whether it tickled your ear a little bit, that they actually bought up the practice field from Temple and much of the land that it's set on. And that's now a part of that congregation. So they've got plenty of space to grow. Okay. Again, this is just a slide which kind of shows how they market. You heard Greg Burr say they deal with about 1,000 plus kids per year. But what he didn't talk about was, again, all the adults inside the congregation, but also in the community that actually take part in other types of pursuits: leisure, fitness, health, wellness, sport. Again, that are kind of couched under a couple of other ministries. Again, I mentioned a few minutes ago about these ideas of ministry communities. The elevation, participation, and sanctification communities all are responsible for ministry that relates to leisure, health, wellness, sport. They just kind of break them up based on target audiences, which is kind of interesting in its own right.
About 5 more minutes, Dr. Waller.
Okay, very good. All right, again, we've seen these guys here. Our guy JB is there, Alan in the middle. The guy on the far right there is Greg Burris. Notice they don't call him a minister. He is an athletic director. And that's exactly how his job description reads. He is the athletic director for Enon Tabernacle and Community. Okay. Okay, so, you know, I think at the core of what we'd like to do is really take a closer look at the mega churches that we know are out there in the US. Again, I'm excited about working with Hartford Institute. Spent a lot of time on the phone with Scott Thuma over there, and they have done an immaculate job in doing nationwide studies over the last 15 years, kind of giving the landscape of congregations across the country. They are very open to working with us. Again, just kind of talked about in the beginning about how they operationalize that term mega church. In their last study, they actually had about 582 responses, a 33% response rate, which is pretty good, considering the fact that this was an e-survey that went out prior to the big moments in the COVID experience here. So they got most of their data back by March, which was good planning on their part. So I'm anxious to look at what they have over and above what they put in print. Let me back. Okay, big thing is, you know, we're just curious about a couple of things. One, programmatically, what are they doing? What kind of amenities do they have in each of these churches? How do they serve the communities? And then even more importantly, how do they finance these ministries? We've seen one model, and that is the congregation pays for everything, principally through tithes and offerings. Okay, we've been thinking about the fact that maybe this is a phased kind of endeavor. Again, kind of taking a case study approach, looking at 3 different congregations initially to kind of frame what we want to do. And again, we haven't had a chance to talk about this a lot. One in Tennessee, one in Mississippi, and then one in Texas. I think we can catch the entire strata of the Bible Belt. The second phase would be an online survey. Again, we'll certainly rely upon our colleagues over at Hartford to give us some direction. First of all, again, want to look at that 2020 data that Hartford's collected. Today, I was thinking about whether or not, Greg or Dave, whether we could get CRSM involved in this piece to largen the pool, and maybe taking a stratified sampling approach, we could get more than 500, particularly churches to get involved. But again, we're still thinking this through. Again, this is something that Dave and Dale and I have been talking about now for a few years, and we can make this happen. I just landed an SEC grant to pay for travel associated with this. The second tier is to go after SEC research grant. And by virtue of the fact that we've got a real good team here that helps us to land funding. A couple of places we're looking at. Andy, you mentioned earlier Lilly. We're also have an eye on Lilly to help fund this, but also going right back to the SEC, going into the research pool now. But essentially, that's what we're proposing to do. And again, we'll be talking more about this in the days that lie ahead. And right there, I'm going to stop and, we'll take any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you guys very much for that presentation. Thanks, Stephen. We have about 1 minute for questions. One point, though, Dr. Waller, is Dr. Connally is no longer interim chair. He is now chair.
Right.
Of the Department of Health, Human Performance, and Recreation. Templeton's another good potential funding source. Look
on my whiteboard behind me, I've got about 6 sources.
Good. Okay, questions for these 3.
Should I lead in prayer for Dr. Connally?
Sure, please. I think the role of denominationalism and the changing role of denominationalism is going to be important in this.
Hey, Stephen.
Yep.
Hey, go Balls, first of all. Quick question for you, because you probably know this is outside of my normal. I know nothing. So, I want to run a hypothesis by you, and you tell me, and others can join in and tell me how stupid it is. So, the Gallup just came out in March with its most recent poll about people who identify church membership, church, synagogue, or mosque. First time in the history of Gallup, it's below 50% of the population says yes to that question. At the same time, mega churches seem to be growing, right? I mean, we have more mega churches than we had 10 years ago, and the churches that exist are growing. And I was thinking about Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone. And so the hypothesis, and I'm sure it's not original, but, are these mega churches able to provide fulfill social needs, help people be part of community, generate social capital? I was intrigued by the community development piece, right? Are these mega churches able to do that where people aren't able to get that in their communities more broadly, right? So they can't get those things in the broader community, but these mega churches are providing more and more of these functions. And thus, as you noted, are becoming sort of central in community development, because that's where social capital is being generated.
Right.
So go ahead, tell me
I think you're right on point. In the last 20 years, an observation is many of the mega churches that I know of have taken on a faith-based economic development approach. Not only are they doing housing, they're also doing catalytic economic development. For example, before coming to UT, I worked as an executive with the Federal Empowerment Zone program in Columbus. And one of the things that I would do as a part of my job is provide money to build up storefronts, to provide catalytic loans for business people. And many churches, we'd make mini grants to do that. For example, near the Ohio State University, there's a really bad area, Livingston Avenue. And one of the areas that we attacked, before I left to come here, was Livingston. Looks like a totally different area. It's now part of the gateway to the Columbus Blue Jackets hockey team, magnificent area, restaurants, mid-price housing, green space, those things that no longer make it look like a desolate zone. And many of the churches are out in front of that. I think even when it comes to failing school systems, mega churches are now doing what institutions could not do.
Thanks, Dr. Waller. We're going to have to leave it there, y'all. We have one more presentation this afternoon by Dr. Michael Jones. So I'm just going to encourage people if they have follow-up questions to Dr. Waller, Dr. Waddell, and Dr. Connally. And we wish you guys luck in your pursuits.
Thank you all.
Let's take